I would like to first of all thank the Nordic Council for having invited me, and of course it's a pity I cannot join you in person, but as you already mentioned, there is a good tradition, and it's a pleasure to be part of this Electricity Market Forum. I'd like to tell you a few words about what we have done recently in Brussels, but also across the member states, and what we have in stock for the next few months or years, and there is quite a lot. And you know that the new Commission started in December. And with this new Commission, there have been certain adaptations of the priorities of the program. But the important thing is that we continue, obviously, on the decarbonization and the energy transition pathway towards climate neutrality by 2050. What we do in this mandate, we focus more than perhaps in the past on competitiveness, affordability of energy, and the security of supply. These are at the fore of our priorities. Obviously, these were the priorities also in the past, but now they really come to the fore. And obviously, the security of supply is something that has been with us during the years of the energy crisis. And we have seen that dependency on imported fossil fuels have created quite a lot of problems, at least over the last 3 years. And now, after the crisis, when the electricity prices decreased, although admittedly not to pre-crisis levels, what we see is the market that obviously works, that helped us through the crisis. But we see that there is still quite some work to do to make this market be more efficient. And just to give you the example, last year was a record year of negative price hours in the power market across the EU, and this record has been broken year by year. And at the same time, when we have seen records of negative price hours, in the same year we have seen very high price spikes in some regions. And that, in our mind, is a kind of call for further action to make sure that our power market is more flexible and more stable. Let me start by kind of looking back at the last mandate. It's been very heavy with new legislation. Many of you will know because you have been either following it or you have been even involved one way or another in discussing these new laws. We have adopted in the European Union a number of new energy laws, policies, revisions to the legislative framework. Just to mention a few: Renewable Energy Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, the Electricity Market Design, the framework for hydrogen and gases, etc., etc. And we revised these laws in order to push further the emissions reductions. We push further cheap renewables such as wind and solar, but we also want to develop markets for green molecules in the sectors where electrification does not work, and we want to adapt our power markets to the new realities. And in fact, many laws which we agreed will help make energy more affordable and more secure. The issue is that these revisions are pretty recent, and they are only now being translated in many cases into national laws, and only now are being put into action. And this is something I want to stress at the beginning. We are in the phase of implementation of all these good provisions that have been agreed upon during the last mandate. One big plank of our energy policy, which helped us to avoid the worst during the crisis, for example, large-scale energy shortages was the European internal market and the ability to rely on our neighbors for cross-border trade, enhance security of supply, and help to mitigate the overall system costs. And let me say a few words about the main elements of the revision of the electricity market design. Since we see that we mainly have deployment of renewables which are supported, we would like to see more supported renewables coming into the market. And this is why the reform of the electricity market introduced measures to promote power purchase agreements and facilitate their expansion to enable these private investments in renewables, especially from the corporate sector. And while the PPAs are one kind of element of the electricity market design, the other element is related to supported renewables. And there we introduce support to investments in new capacity under the form of two-way contracts for difference. We have now mandatory design criteria that will ensure that these contracts preserve incentives to operate efficiently for renewables, to operate efficiently in the electricity markets. And then we have also provisions that allow mixing up PPAs, so the market-based tools promoting renewables with the support through these two-way CFDs. These instruments will ensure low and predictable costs of renewables, and the fact that these benefits of cheap renewables are passed to consumer bills and thereby contribute to the affordability of energy costs. And at the same time, they will enhance revenue certainty for investors and incentivize investments in renewable and low carbon solutions needed to boost our energy transition. Finally, in particular, in the case of PPAs, these are the instruments that are good for the state budgets. They are not supported, and that's why we will focus on this much more than in the previous mandate. We are sorry. Beyond renewables, we also introduced elements related to streamlining of capacity mechanisms. And in line with these new provisions, we issued a new report on the current process for approving capacity mechanisms, on how this can be done in more quickly, in a simpler manner. And alongside this recent report, the Commission also published proposals to simplify the approval process for capacity mechanisms. This is included in the draft new framework for state aid measures, which support clean industrial deals, so-called CSAF. And it is planned to be adopted and put in place, in force, still in this half of the year. And finally, a few words on the topic of flexibility that becomes much more important, I think, in this mandate when we see these imbalances, let's say, in the power market. It's obvious that we need much more of the flexibility solutions, both on the storage side, but also on the demand side. And this is what you see in these provisions in the electricity market design. We have provisions related to, to the assessment of the flexibility needs by the member states. We have also provisions related to the member states setting indicative objectives to increase this non-fossil flexibility. And finally, the member states, based on the electricity market design, have the possibility to introduce new support schemes dedicated to non-fossil flexibility. In parallel, we are working on technical rules in order to, again, increase flexibility in the markets, and we're working on the draft network code on demand response, and we plan to have public consultation on this later this year. So that is kind of the basis on which we're building in this mandate. But already at the beginning of this new mandate, there have been a number of strategic documents adopted by the new Commission, fleshing out what we have in stock again for the next months of this year and for the next years. And we will focus on integrating growing volumes of renewables into our energy system. I mentioned in order to pass their benefits to the consumers. This requires better functioning internal market, both as concerns hardware, i.e. infrastructure or storage installations, but also software. So think about all the rules, for example, on trading power across the EU. This is what we want to focus much more. And we see the studies and the figures out there, they show very clearly that a more interconnected, a better functioning European market would bring savings, would help to bring down the costs of the market functioning of energy to the consumers. One or two very important documents, strategic documents that were adopted, building on the Draghi report, were the Clean Industrial Deal and the Action Plan for Affordable Energy. And I will not go through all the measures that were included in there, but I would focus on the kind of four pillars that the Action Plan for Affordable Energy focuses on. The first one is lowering the energy costs. And there we're looking at anything that can have effects from the short term through mid-term to long term. Think about lowering taxes and levies in the electricity bill, making network charges more efficient, accelerating permitting for renewables, grids and storage, promoting long-term contracts. I mentioned the PPAs, but not only, also deepening of the forward electricity markets, improving gas market oversight, and enhancing energy efficiency. The other pillar of the plan is the completion of the energy union. You know that we have embarked on this journey of building the energy union. Well, over 10 years ago, we have gone quite a lot in this direction, but there are still issues that need to be addressed, and it's about a stronger grid and more interconnections. I mentioned the need for deeper market integration also on the rules side, boosting electrification and the decarbonization of the heating and cooling sector. And it's also about the more clean energy investment. In order to do it, we need to focus more on mobilizing private capital. And we want to also launch the Energy Union Task Force to enhance the coordination between different players involved in the functioning, in the planning of the energy policies across the EU. Another pillar is on exactly the investments, attracting the investments and ensuring the deliveries. And here, what we want to do is we want to bring together people from the energy sector, the suppliers, the generators, but also the off-takers from the industry, also the consumers and the public authorities, in order to kind of make them sit around one table and break the vicious circle of uncertainty and bring various commitments to this table from different sides in order to unlock these investments and accelerate deployment. One more aspect related to the investment is also making sure that the manufacturing of the equipment necessary for the investments is, again, secure, that the supply chains are secure. And this is why we're finishing with the technical rules to the Net Zero Industry Act in order to make sure that we don't run into undue dependencies in terms of all the equipment that these investments will necessitate. The final pillar, we want to ensure that we are prepared for crisis in the future. We don't obviously foresee any at this stage, but we have gone through a very, very big crisis. We want to be prepared if anything like this happens in the future. And this is why we are reviewing the European Energy Security Framework to incorporate the lessons learned from the past. And we also enhance our price crisis response tools, and that would be tools improving demand-side management, but also enabling temporary increase of cross-border capacities during the crisis. I will now conclude. As you see, we are working in parallel on the implementation of the legislation agreed under the last mandate. We work with the member states on ensuring that this legislation is put in action as quickly as possible. And at the same time, we are focusing on also on the identified gaps, let's say, or bottlenecks or issues that can make the markets work better, that can help us to arrive at a more interconnected market. And this, obviously, we try to do mostly in non-regulatory manner, also through simplification of the rules in order to kind of unleash the private sector energy. And we're trying to help the member states make the best use of the tools that are at their disposal to bring down the energy cost and to make sure that energy in the European Union is secure. And I believe that, you know, you can also help us to bring the importance of all this to the attention of the member states, help us to press them with the implementation of these rules. And finally, for all these new measures that I mentioned, please do participate in the public consultations. For most of them, we will be looking for inputs and contributions from out there in order to make sure that they are as good as possible. And I will stop here. Thank you very much for the attention, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion.